Hello everyone, and welcome to this deep dive into the life of one of the most fascinating, controversial, and influential women of the 20th century, Pamela Churchill Harriman. You may have heard her described as a courtesan, socialite, political insider, or even a diplomatic powerhouse. The truth is that she was all these things rolled into one. Born an English aristocrat, she emerged to play vital, though often covert, roles in global politics, high society, and international business. Today, we take you through her remarkable journey, from the quiet fields of Dorset to the grand salons of Paris, and from the corridors of Westminster to the top echelons of Washington, D.C. Amid the grand backdrops of 20th century Europe and America, there's a story of a woman who refused to be confined by the rules of her time. Pamela Beryl Digby came into the world on March 20th, 1920, at a moment when the old aristocratic structures still reigned in Britain. She would go on to embody both the glamour and the scandal associated with high society, but also carve out a role as an influential figure in politics and diplomacy. Throughout her life, she was labelled in many ways: opportunist, survivor, seductress, power player. Each label reveals one dimension of the same person, and each new chapter of her life shows us how she navigated and shaped the modern world around her, often from behind the scenes. In today's video, we'll explore her path step by step, showing how she turned wartime London into her personal stepping stone, used her connections to influence major political decisions, and ultimately became the US ambassador to France. Pamela was born into the Digby family, one of the oldest noble lines in England. Her father, Edward Kenelm Digby, the 11th Baron Digby, was a decorated First World War veteran who received the French Croix de Guerre. Her mother, Constance Pamela Alice Bruce, also belonged to an aristocratic clan. By birth, Pamela had a claim to centuries of tradition and privilege, but there was a catch. Britain's inheritance laws favoured male heirs. This meant that, as the eldest daughter, she would inherit almost nothing. Her younger brother would one day control the title and the estate. During her childhood in Dorset, Pamela found the countryside dull. She yearned for the sophistication of London and the promise of city life. Her family, however, had little interest in giving her a world-class education or career prospects. Young women of her standing were expected to marry well, host elegant gatherings, and uphold social traditions. Pamela's looks did not conform to the conventional standards of her time. Some called her plain, others teased her about baby fat. At debutante balls, she didn't sparkle in the way the tall, slender socialites did. From a young age, she had to rely on something beyond physical beauty. She discovered that an engaging personality, a willingness to learn, and the courage to strike up conversations with anyone would prove far more valuable. Pamela's first leap into the upper ranks of British society came through Randolph Churchill, Winston Churchill's only son. When they met in 1939, war clouds loomed over Europe. Britain was on the brink of a conflict with Germany, and people everywhere were anxious about the future. Randolph, who had gained a reputation as a gambler and playboy, was especially concerned that he might not survive the war. He proposed marriage to Pamela almost immediately, seeing her as someone who could bear him an heir and perhaps provide a stable presence in his unpredictable life. Pamela, who had grown restless in Dorset, saw in Randolph the excitement and access she craved. The Churchill name opened doors to the highest levels of the British government. In October 1939, they married, barely 2 months after Britain officially entered World War II. Their marriage produced a son, Winston, named after his famous grandfather. But the relationship soon deteriorated. Randolph was a heavy drinker, a frequent gambler and deeply in debt. He even expected Pamela to settle his mounting gambling obligations. Marriage did not bring her happiness, but it introduced her to wartime London, where she would cultivate relationships that would shape her life and, some say, the course of Anglo-American relations. It didn't take long for Pamela to realize that her husband's behavior spelled trouble. She found herself isolated in a small London apartment, caught between air raid sirens and the swirl of high society gatherings that carried on despite the Blitz. Yet two powerful men recognized that this young woman had potential. Lord Beaverbrook, a prominent newspaper magnate, and Winston Churchill himself. Beaverbrook noticed Pamela's sharp mind and lively personality. He saw that she could charm influential people, gather important gossip, and pass along insights that might prove politically useful. Winston Churchill, too, sensed that his daughter-in-law was no ordinary British socialite. She was fearless, curious, and eager for a sense of purpose. In a time when relationships were often forged in moments of national crisis, Pamela's proximity to power proved pivotal. It was during this period that she met and began her affair with W. Averill Harriman, a name that would echo throughout her life. Harriman was President Franklin D. Roosevelt's special envoy, overseeing Lend-Lease, the US program to provide war supplies to Britain. Wealthy, charming, and nearly 3 decades older, Harriman offered Pamela everything Randolph lacked: stability, respect, financial generosity, and a keen political mind. Through Harriman, Pamela effectively became a bridge between British and American interests, sharing tidbits with Beaverbrook and Winston Churchill about how Washington viewed the war effort. Harriman was not the only American in Pamela's orbit. She also became romantically involved with Bill Paley, the founder of CBS, and Edward R. Murrow, one of America's most esteemed broadcasters. For Pamela, each relationship served multiple purposes: emotional fulfillment, financial backing, and social or political connectivity. Her ability to win the affection of accomplished older men became something of a hallmark. Her marriage to Randolph lingered on paper until 1945, but it had dissolved in spirit long before that. By the time World War II ended, Pamela was already entrenched in a network of transatlantic elites, a position that might have scandalized the traditional British upper classes, but that also gave her a unique vantage point in global politics. Despite the disapproval in some British circles, she managed to maintain the goodwill of Winston Churchill. After all, she played a subtle but meaningful role in fostering ties between Britain and America at a time when those ties might have been in jeopardy. Through Harriman, Lord Beaverbrook, and various other contacts, she facilitated a constant exchange of information, bridging the gap between two nations that desperately needed each other. When the war finally ended, Britain was left battered. Rationing persisted. Cities lay in ruins, and Winston Churchill was no longer Prime Minister. Pamela found this new landscape unwelcoming. London was no longer the vibrant playground of intrigue it had been during wartime, and she felt stifled. Moreover, many of her American lovers returned home, and the glimmer of excitement in Britain's high society had faded. Sensing her restlessness, Lord Beaverbrook gave her a new opportunity. He wanted her to write for his media empire, initially in New York, but then reassigned her to Paris when that plan fell through. The City of Light was just emerging from German occupation, eager to reclaim its position as the world's fashion and cultural capital. For someone like Pamela, charismatic, well-connected, hungry for fresh scenery, Paris was ideal. In post-liberation Paris, Pamela discovered a different kind of high society, one that was flamboyant, exciting, and filled with people from diverse backgrounds. She wrote social columns, and mingled with titans of industry, shipping magnates like Stavros Niarchos and Aristotle Onassis, and even Prince Ali Khan, son of the Aga Khan. Prince Ali Khan enjoyed a notorious reputation as a playboy who dazzled women and indulged in lavish parties. For a time, Pamela became part of his inner circle. This affair taught her new lessons about seduction and the powerful draw of global elites. Ali Khan soon fell for Hollywood star Rita Hayworth, shifting his attention away from Pamela. Rather than mourn her loss, Pamela simply moved on. Her time with Ali Khan had refined her already impressive social skills and expanded her connections in Paris, a city that was regaining its status as the epicenter of European style and culture. Of all Pamela's relationships in Europe, perhaps the most significant involved Gianni Agnelli, the dashing heir to Italy's Fiat empire. Known as l'avvocato, Agnelli was modern, immensely wealthy, and adept at mixing business with pleasure. By 1948, Pamela had fallen under his spell, and for nearly 5 years, she lived a life of jet-setting glamour, skiing in St. Moritz, sunbathing on the Riviera, and attending glamorous events across Europe. During this period, she placed her son Winston in a Swiss boarding school, ensuring he was cared for while she indulged in her high-flying romance. She even converted to Catholicism in hopes that Agnelli would marry her. At one point, she became pregnant and was persuaded to have an abortion to avoid tarnishing Agnelli's image. Despite her devotion, Agnelli couldn't be pinned down. A devastating car accident nearly took his leg, but even that didn't bring him closer to fidelity. He soon impregnated another woman, Marella Caracciolo di Castagneto, who came from a noble Italian family. The couple married, leaving Pamela out in the cold. Yet, Agnelli compensated her generously with a Bentley, an apartment, and a substantial sum of money. She was left with a broken heart, but also with more security than most women in her position might have hoped for. She had witnessed firsthand how wealth, power, and prestige intersected in post-war Europe. And although she suffered her share of heartbreak, she emerged wealthier, wiser, and more determined to find a stable future. Shortly after her breakup with Agnelli, Pamela entered another glamorous liaison, this time with Baron Élie de Rothschild, one of France's richest men. As a member of the legendary Rothschild banking dynasty, Élie introduced Pamela to an even more refined world: art, antiques, winemaking, and the intricacies of horse breeding. In these circles, she sharpened her cultural sophistication. Suddenly, Pamela was not just a beautiful companion. She was a woman who could discourse on fine art, vintage wines, and pedigreed horses. However, as she'd already experienced, these affairs came with considerable risk. The Baron's wife learned of the relationship and reportedly rammed her car into Pamela's Bentley in retaliation. Fortunately, both women escaped serious harm, but it was clear that this arrangement couldn't last indefinitely. Pamela moved on once more, but not before solidifying her reputation as someone who could float effortlessly among Europe's aristocratic and business elite. By the late 1950s, Pamela was approaching 40 and feeling an urge to secure her long-term future. She had spent a decade among Europe's wealthiest circles, yet each affair ended in heartbreak or a quiet settlement. That's when Leland Hayward entered the picture. Hayward, a notable American theatrical agent and producer, was married to the famous socialite Slim Keith, but their union was on shaky ground. Hayward fell in love with Pamela's aristocratic background and poised demeanor, seemingly overlooking her past. In short order, he divorced Slim and proposed to Pamela. Sensing an opportunity for genuine stability, she agreed. She sold her home in Paris and relocated to New York, where she and Hayward married in a modest civil ceremony. In New York, Pamela found a new stage for her social prowess. The couple bought an apartment on Fifth Avenue, opposite the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and began hosting stylish dinner parties. Their soirees drew not just high society figures, but also Hollywood celebrities, artists, and political influencers. One regular guest, Truman Capote, found Pamela irresistible as a subject. Her ascent from obscure country girl to worldly social maven intrigued him. People who might have been critical, especially those loyal to Slim Keith, found themselves won over by Pamela's charm. Pamela soon turned her flair for style into a profitable venture by opening a boutique specializing in antiques and reproductions in 1963. Armed with her knowledge of French artisanship and European décor, she quickly built a clientele that included the wealthy and well-known. The boutique thrived. However, her personal life with Hayward was less smooth. Hayward carried deep emotional scars. His first wife had died by suicide, and just months before he met Pamela, his daughter Bridget also took her own life. Professionally, his work as a theatrical agent had its ups and downs, and he self-medicated with heavy drinking. As his health deteriorated in the late 1960s, Pamela sold the boutique to devote herself to his care. In March 1971, Hayward suffered several strokes and passed away, leaving Pamela widowed at 51. Their marriage of 11 years had depleted much of his wealth, and she found herself at a crossroads yet again. Coping with grief, she spent time with friends, including Frank Sinatra and Gloria Guinness, traveling with them on a Mediterranean cruise. This, of course, stirred talk. Pamela's life rarely escaped public scrutiny. Upon returning to the United States, Pamela discovered that one of her old loves, Beryl Harriman, was also grieving. Harriman's wife, H. Jad, recently passed away. Truman Capote encouraged Pamela to renew her friendship with the prominent American statesman. What began as a reconnection of old friends became a profound romance. Within 6 months of Hayward's death, Pamela married Harriman and moved to his home in the Georgetown district of Washington, D.C. For anyone who had followed her story, this seemed like a fairy tale coda. The dashing wartime lover reappearing in her life, this time free to commit. More than just a romantic reunion, this marriage thrust Pamela firmly into the heart of American politics. Harriman was deeply embedded in the Democratic Party, having served as governor of New York, Secretary of Commerce, and an advisor to various US presidents. As his wife, Pamela hosted lavish events that drew senators, diplomats, and political strategists. She became a Democratic Party fundraiser, building on her talent for networking and social organization. No longer merely the mistress or companion of powerful men, she was now recognized as a political force in her own right. Her gatherings served as informal think tanks, where policy ideas were exchanged over canapes and champagne. However, her old friend Truman Capote couldn't resist fictionalizing Pamela's life in his unfinished novel, Answered Prayers. In it, he made a scathing remark, suggesting she had so many men going into her that if they all stuck out, she'd resemble a porcupine. Pamela was reportedly furious, and their friendship ended. Capote's portrayal may have been cruel, but it underscored just how sensational her rise from obscure debutante to insider of American politics truly was. In 1986, Harriman passed away, leaving Pamela a fortune of about $115 million. Widowed for the third time, she did not retreat into a quiet life. Instead, she became an even more prominent fixture in the Democratic Party. She raised funds, advised candidates, and used her influence to help shape campaigns. It was her way of honouring Harriman's legacy and leveraging her own social capital. Her dedication to democratic politics caught the eye of Bill Clinton, who, after becoming president, appointed her as US ambassador to France in 1993. For Pamela, this was the pinnacle of a lifetime spent moving between European and American power centers. Arriving in Paris as a diplomat, she drew on her old relationships, her fluent French, and her love of the city to become a valuable envoy. Some critics dismissed her appointment as a political favor, but even they acknowledged her adept handling of Franco-American relations. On February 5th, 1997, tragedy struck. While staying at the Ritz in Paris, Pamela Churchill Harriman suffered a cerebral hemorrhage while swimming in the hotel's pool. She died the next day at the age of 76. The French government, under President Jacques Chirac, bestowed upon her the Grand Cross of the Légion d'honneur, an extraordinary recognition for a foreign diplomat, and a testament to her substantial role in strengthening France-US ties. In an equally remarkable gesture, President Bill Clinton arranged for Air Force One to bring her remains back to the United States. He also spoke at her funeral at the Washington National Cathedral, praising her public service. It was an ending that perfectly encapsulated Pamela's life, a display of diplomatic honor and high-level recognition, intertwined with personal tragedy and public spectacle. How should we remember Pamela Churchill Harriman? So, how do we make sense of Pamela Churchill Harriman's life? She was called many things: a cunning opportunist, a politically savvy hostess, a survivor of heartbreak, a skilled negotiator, and a scandalous courtesan. In truth, every label captures a fragment of her multifaceted existence. Influence on politics. From her role in bolstering the Anglo-American alliance during World War II to her fundraising efforts for Democratic candidates, Pamela found ways to exert quiet yet profound influence. Romance and strategy. She famously leveraged her charm and relationships with older, powerful men to secure her social and financial standing. Whether you see that as shrewd strategy or moral compromise, it was a path that allowed her to thrive at a time when women's options were severely limited. Diplomatic achievements. Her final act as the US ambassador to France demonstrated that her life's experiences, sometimes scandalous, sometimes heroic, had prepared her to serve in an official capacity. She was respected in diplomatic circles, and even in her final hours, the French government acknowledged her contributions. For some viewers, Pamela's choices may seem opportunistic or even cold. Yet if we step back and consider the era she lived in, when marriage and affairs were often the only routes for women to gain real influence, we might see her as a pioneer. She capitalized on what she could, took risks, and reinvented herself in each new stage of her life. From the English countryside to the halls of the Paris embassy, from her tumultuous marriage to Randolph Churchill, to her role as a linchpin in democratic politics, Pamela Churchill Harriman lived a life that was undeniably extraordinary. She maneuvered through wars, multiple marriages, passionate affairs, and massive political shifts, always managing to land on her feet. Her story offers a lens into how power, wealth, and international alliances intersect behind the scenes. It also invites us to question societal double standards. Men who pursue wealth and power are often admired. Women who do the same, especially through relationships, are more likely to face public scorn. Yet Pamela used every tool at her disposal to secure independence, leaving behind a legacy that, whether you applaud her or judge her, remains utterly unique. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Pamela Churchill Harriman's life. She may not have always behaved in the ways we consider proper, but her tale illustrates one woman's unyielding drive to shape her destiny in a world that seldom allowed women to do so on their own terms. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and consider subscribing for more deep dives into remarkable lives and historical intrigue. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.